And then we'll have half an hour, and then at the last 10 minutes, I want to make sure we touch on that survey, and then we're going to definitely want the task force to give staff some direction. So if you have any other input or anything on the PICO and key questions, et cetera, hold those until those last 10 minutes.
And so I've got 16 folks here that have signed up to testify. Is there anybody that didn't get their name on the sheet that wanted to testify?
And for those of you who are not familiar with our process, what we will do is we ask that 3 folks, Darren will call up 3 names. There's the table there with the 3 chairs. If you could state your name and any organization you represent, and if you don't, that's fine, you can represent yourself, and then any conflicts of interest. And the conflicts of interest would be mainly financial, so if you have ties to a specific pharmaceutical company, for example. It's not whether you are a patient or a provider, etc.
And so with 30 minutes and 16 people, we're going to have enough time to allow 1.5 minutes per person to allow for, introducing yourselves and stating conflicts of interest and transition time getting up to the table, which isn't counted against you. So I'll call up the first 3 names. Oh, and I'll have some time cards with 1 minute left and 30 seconds in time, so you can know where you're at in your testimony. So if I could have the first 3 people come to the table, Diane Weaver, Kate Nicholson, and Dr. Richard Lauhern.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question while you're coming to the table? Just to clarify, I think that our original body of work was to consider whether to add a benefit for something that is not currently covered.
Right.
And I think that a public understanding is that the goal was to take away benefits that might already exist. So really our work is thinking about adding a benefit that is not currently present, and then to consider the potential unforeseen consequences of adding that benefit. Is that still our body of work?
Right, so currently the diagnoses we're considering are not covered, so there's no access to physical therapy, you may have access to cognitive behavioral therapy if you have depression or anxiety or another diagnosis, but not specifically for these. And also technically no access to medications, and I know some CCOs have actually been applying that. So if this is a below-the-line condition, you don't have access to any medications regardless of what this group says.
Okay, Diane Weaver.
Good morning. My name is Diane Weaver, and I'm on the Health Policy and Health Economics team in Avanos. Avanos is a manufacturer of a medical device company. I have no conflict of interest to be here other than representing a non-opioid treatment for chronic back pain. Back pain for both the facet joint and the hip and the knee. Basically how it works is it is a medical device that is for cooled radio frequency, and this particular medical device takes less than 45 minutes in the OR. It basically denervates the nerve or ablates the nerve, and it interrupts the pain signal from the nerve to the brain. We have many randomized control trials. There's a systematic review in the packet that Jason is actually handing out right now. One of the things that I really want to talk to you about very quickly is that it's a cooled thermal radio frequency. It is not cryoablation, it's not pulsed, and it's not low thermal. It denervates the nerve equal to or greater than 80 degrees Celsius. This is the first and only FDA cleared product for denervating the nerve in chronic nerve pain lasting up to 24 months. So there's a new study, randomized control study by Davis, showing that there is chronic nerve pain relief up to 24 months. I'm sorry, did you say time?
30 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I really wanted everybody to know that what Avanos does is we put together cadaver labs, both here within Portland, Oregon area, as well as Seattle. We welcome you to come to a cadaver lab. We solicit physicians that would like to understand proper patient selection and proper medical technique. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Kate Nicholson.
Reading on behalf of Ms. Wilson. This is a 3-minute, I think about 3 minutes, so just let me know if I'm going over. Kate Nicholson is a civil rights attorney and a nationally recognized expert on disability law who serves as a lawyer and manager in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division for 20 years. Patients deserve safe, effective choices to relieve pain, not just a pill. So begins a letter from Patrick Allen of the Oregon Health Authority in the Wall Street Journal. In response to the August 17th opinion piece, Oregon Overshoots on Opioids, by addiction experts Sally Sattel and Stephen Cortez. Absolutely. The problem with Oregon's proposal is not the expansion of choices, but the elimination of them. Oregon proposes to deny Medicaid coverages of prescription opioids to most chronic pain patients after 90 days. As I and a number of pain and addiction experts explained, in a comment of the proposal submitted on August 7, 2018, it does so in contraveningly of every federal and professional guideline on opioid prescribing, including that issued by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 2016. I personally experienced severe intractable pain after a surgical accident left me unable to sit, stand, or walk for almost 20 years. Appropriate pain treatment that for a time included opioids enabled me to continue work as a high-level civil rights attorney for the Department of Justice, despite my physical limitations. The CDC just issued an updated report on the prevalence of chronic pain and found that of the 50 million Americans who suffer from chronic pain, almost 20 million have debilitating pain that limits major life activities like mine. Undoubtedly, some of these people live in Oregon.
Sorry. Could you provide that to Jason, and we'll be sure to circulate it?
Hi there. I'm Evelyn Blackburn with the Oregon Pain Action Group, and I'll be reading for Richard Lawhorn. He's a doctor, or director of research at the Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain. And he says, as I noted in May before this group, the CDC data shows us that there is very little relationship between rates of opioid prescribing by doctors versus opioid-related overdose mortality. Today, I offer further insight on the demographics of chronic pain addiction and opioid mortality. If medical prescribing contributes substantially to opioid mortality, then we should expect to see higher mortality in groups prescribed opioids most often, but we don't. People over 50 are prescribed opioids 250% more often than young adults, but over the past 17 years, mortality has skyrocketed in youth, while remaining stable among seniors at the lowest level for any age group. Patients who benefited the most from liberalized prescription policies before 2010 have shown no increased risk of opioid mortality. Where is cause and effect here? Large-scale studies also show that risk of abuse or chronic prescribing among surgical patients prescribed opioids is 0.6% or less. Yet prevailing public policy seeks to save this small minority by restricting pain treatment to 99.4% of patients. Where is the justice in that? You need to be guided by a quote from Dr. Nora Volkow, who addressed the task force in May. She says, unlike tolerance and physical dependence, addiction is not a predictable result of opioid prescribing. Addiction occurs only in a small percentage of persons who are exposed to opioids. Even among those with pre-existing vulnerabilities, older medical texts in several versions of the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, either overemphasized the role of tolerance and physical dependence in the definition of addiction or equated these processes. However, more recent studies have shown that the molecular mechanisms underlying addiction are distinct from those responsible for tolerance and physical dependence.
So I'm sorry, we're going to have
I put two sentences here. From this background, I urge the task force not to further restrict availability of opioid analgesic therapy to people in agony. The medical evidence does not support such action. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Twillman, Dr. Aquino, and Stefan Streck.
Stefan Streck.
Stefan.
I was going
Were you
to be
touching the mic
speaking
stand?
for
No.
You know some pounding up there?
and actually going to hand it out to you.
Dr.
And Dr. Chino,
That's horrible. I keep thinking it's people upstairs.
So I just have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Because there was supposed to be a Q&A thing, that's gone, but I'm wondering, do you all agree that opioids should be taken off as a treatment? Are you all in agreement that opioids should be discontinued by patients? Yes or no?
You gotta qualify that. Are you,
Do you,
for what patients?
for Medicaid patients that are chronic pain patients that are currently on medication, the ones that you've been referring to tapering to zero, are you all in agreement that they should be off opioid medications?
So I think I clarified at the beginning of the testimony, that's not actually the question at hand here. The question
That's
that
the
we're...
question that I have. Do you, yes or no, do you feel that opioids should be not used for chronic pain? You guys can't answer that? You really don't want to
But
answer
if you're
that?
asking a question saying, do you all, and there's,
Okay, do you, sir, do
Do
you
I?
believe that opioids should be stopped being used?
I do.
And do
Yeah.
you believe that as
Can
well?
I finish the question though? Okay, so here's the question. This comes back to the pain part. It isn't a question of time, chronic versus acute. Is what is involved in contributing to somebody's pain. When you look at how pain is constructed, where opioids work best is for pain that has a primary peripheral component. We have tissue-based nociceptors present. That is where opioids work well. For chronic non-cancer pain, pain that's been there for months and years, in general situations, that is not a large component that is involved in it. That peripheral primary nociceptive component is not there. I'm sorry, I'm using the time up there. For in that situation, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, and so, and your name is, I'm sorry, at the table?
Who's asking me?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
A minute and a half?
Yeah, there is no 3 minutes.
All right, so I was just in Amsterdam for 2 weeks at the start of the summer. They already have the solution that you're looking for. Since the 70s, heroin addicts in the Netherlands can subscribe to a program where they're given heroin by the government 3 times a day. Since then, their addiction population has dropped basically to zero. If you're looking for a solution, this panel should be dissolved, aim towards legalizing heroin, and leave patients who get a regulated dosage of their painkillers alone. What you're doing is cruel and unusual punishment to tell a war veteran who's had their legs blown off by an IED that they have to do yoga instead of getting an effective medication. It's also robbery of the taxpayers by saying that medication which costs hundreds of dollars like Suboxone or something with incredibly addictive properties like gabapentin is a substitute for cheap and effective medications such as Vicodin. What you're doing is ignorant, what you're doing is arrogant, and above all, what you're doing is cruel and unusual, and it's wrong. If you want to be compassionate, find the solution. I've pointed out the solution. Legalize it. People don't want to be addicts. They don't want to have to show up to a government office 3 times a day to get heroin. Over time, over the past 40 years, 50 years, the average heroin addict age in the Netherlands has gone from about 30 to about 70 because all of these people have aged into the population. They have solved their problem, and if you want to solve the problem here in Oregon, follow their lead. Thank you.
We're not addicts, by the way. Thank you.
Kira McGee, Kelly Howard, and Dr.
Good job.
Tricia Wong.